Pre-orders for the most expensive version of The Last of Us Remake are already selling out. God of War Ragnarok looks like it might be coming out in November. And if you're looking for a recap and some extra takes on the Summer Games Fest and Devolver Digital Showcases, which happened yesterday, stick around. I'm going to jump into all of that. Today's format is going to be a little bit different than our kind of short, just the news section. I'm going to kind of run through, today's most relevant news stories and then kind of recap the big news from yesterday, since there's just so much video game news to cover. So hang out. Sorry, it's going to be a little more off the hip today. I'm going to try not to cut this down or to even add too much B-roll. So if I make a mistake or it just gets a little bit boring, sorry, we'll be back to kind of the normal short format videos next week. To kick things off, I think one of the bigger stories that came out today was that despite so many people being so vocal about how much we don't need a Last of Us remake or a remake for a game that's only 9 years old that already had a remaster, everybody is buying this game up, and it seems like a lot of fans are really excited about The Last of Us Remake. There's an article on VGC that says The Last of Us Remake's $100 Firefly Edition has already sold out. There are 3 versions of this thing, which all are gonna come out on September 2nd for PS5. No date for PC yet. And there's one of those nifty charts that shows you what comes with each edition of the game, it looks like. So the basic version of the game is just gonna be standard price, $70. You just get the game. The deluxe digital edition, which is gonna cost you $80, it comes with all the digital goodies that you kind of would associate with the digital deluxe edition of any game at this point. It's nothing new. Looks like you're gonna get increased crafting speed, increased healing speed, an upgrade for reload speed for the 9mm, clip capacity increase, explosive arrows, looks like a video filter, speedrun mode, and then a bunch of weapon skins. Then for the Firefly Edition, which is the one that's sold out, it's $100, and it includes all of the digital deluxe stuff, plus a steelbook case and the Last of Us American Dreams comic issues 1 through 4. And they have new cover art, I guess. This looks like it's a US only thing, and it's available via PlayStation Direct, which is like the PlayStation Store, but it's already listed as out of stock. So there you go. I know there's a lot of people who are always talking mess about The Last of Us, and even the same thing happened with The Last of Us 2, which I think just hit a benchmark, or somebody had reported recently that it sold over 10 million copies despite all of the vocal and verbal backlash that The Last of Us 2 got, and a lot of people saying they're gonna boycott that game. It just, at the end of the day, really didn't matter. I'm not sure. I think there's a lot of different reasons different people don't like The Last of Us 2. That's totally fine, but I think that you kind of have to acknowledge that even if you don't like The Last of Us 2, it does do some really interesting things. For me, particularly, like being under that hospital level, playing as Abby is like a pretty remarkable stretch of gameplay in there, as well as like the skyscraper stuff. So there are remarkable things in that game, I think, even if you don't like it objectively. Technically, it's a very pretty looking game. And now we're gonna kind of get that Last of Us 2 treatment for The Last of Us 1. And yeah, I think people are excited. The upgrade from the original to this one, it's not a huge jump, I know, but it seems like people are still excited. It's The Last of Us. I think a lot of us are gonna jump back in to kind of re-experience that game with higher fidelity and see kind of just what kind of the treatment is that they've done. Maybe on the consumer side, it doesn't make a ton of sense, but on the developer side, for them to kind of cut their teeth making a PS5 kind of exclusive game or a PS5 oriented game, to kind of go through the paces, learn the hardware, and going through all of the motions, all of the steps to fully ship a game, that makes a lot of sense for Naughty Dog. They know that The Last of Us is popular. They've got a lot of work for the game already done. Obviously, they don't have to go through and mocap the whole game all over again. They are building it from the ground up as far as assets are concerned, and different effects and things like that. So that's kind of an interesting aspect of it. I think for people saying that it's kind of unnecessary, yes, maybe on the consumer side, it does seem kind of excessive, but I think on the developer side, it's a really good way to kind of have a low risk project that you can cut your teeth on making a game for a next gen console, instead of trying to make the biggest and best and most awesome next thing while also kind of developing an all new game from the ground up. So I think that's why it's happening. I think it's going to be a smart move. I think obviously it's going to sell pretty dang well. All right, let's move on. According to Jason Schreier, friend of the show over there at Bloomberg, the highly anticipated PlayStation game God of War Ragnarok is planned for release this November, according to 3 people familiar with the game's development, despite reports this week that it had slipped to 2023. And that's kind of reassuring to hear. It's not official, obviously, but I think it's reassuring for a lot of players out there, Redfall and Starfield got delayed. Those big titles for Xbox got delayed, and I think there's been a lot of other games that have been pushed into 2023, and this happened last year where games got pushed out of 2021 into 2022. So, here we are kind of hoping among hopes that God of War doesn't also get delayed, even though the official word from Sony is that they are going to have God of War in 2022. We just haven't heard anything about it yet. I think there's going to be a big Sony showcase in September. That's just my guess. I could see them doing something earlier as soon as they kind of lock it down and for sure know that God of War Ragnarok is ready to ship, that they could even do like a standalone direct sometime in July or August, even before like that big PlayStation September showcase or something like that. But that's just my guess. All right, that's gonna do it for kind of the new news, the Friday news. There's some other stuff going around with Dragon Age animated series and some other kind of video game adjacent stuff. But for today, since we didn't cover it in any other videos this week, I wanted to talk a little bit about Summer Games Fest and the Devolver Digital Showcase. My light went off. We didn't have time to fix it. We're gonna go right through. So let's jump into all of these Summer Game Fest games and kind of just talk about them. I took notes on pretty much every single game that was announced and that was shown at the show. I think overall there's been kind of this reception to it that it wasn't a very strong show, kind of slow, kind of long, kind of boring. There were some big games there, mostly smaller titles, but I think that Jeff Keighley kind of caught a lot of fire of people saying like the show wasn't that good this year, and a lot of people kind of blaming Jeff for this. But you have to realize that he doesn't make the games, right? He can only show what game developers and publishers are willing to share with him. And Summer Game Fest is caught right between the PlayStation Showcase, which already happened, and then the Xbox Showcase, which is going to happen on Sunday. So a lot of big titles probably got pulled into one of those or the others. For example, like Street Fighter 6, we already saw that at the PlayStation show. So we got the Guile reveal at Summer Game Fest, which is cool, but it's not as cool as like a full-on reveal of a game, like first gameplay and all of that. And then there was also games that were shown at Summer Game Fest, like the Frost Giant project, which is basically ex-StarCraft devs making a new RTS, where it just didn't show very good, right? I think we got invited to kind of a preview event for that, and I saw basically the same thing that they showed at Summer Games Fest, but also with like kind of a presentation from the developers saying what they're trying to do, and they're basically making StarCraft and then also like they're making an RTS essentially and totally modernizing it. They only have a couple of those screenshots, right, of the work that they've kind of completed with assets that they have and game assets that they're building in Unreal 5. But what they showed was a cinematic trailer that I think is maybe good for kind of like flavor, but as far as what people are expecting from a game, there was not like a lot to get excited about there. And if you didn't know who Frost Giant was, there isn't really, I'm sure there's RTS fans who maybe didn't even know that Frost Giant is made up of a lot of old, ex-StarCraft people and Warcraft people, Warcraft 3 people, that kind of started their own studio off of the Blizzard stuff before like everything caught on fire. So I think there's stuff like that probably maybe just didn't show that well. Call of Duty, huge game. I think that kind of gameplay trailer was very impressive looking, but in terms of action, kind of slow and middling, right? You're moving through there and it's kind of just like the shooting gallery thing. It was cool to have like a nice long stretch of gameplay, but if you think back to kind of more like even in Call of Duty 4, seeing that original tanker, or I think it's like a ship level, kind of just the progression of the narrative there, I think is like much more exciting than what we saw with this Modern Warfare 2 kind of reimagining. And yeah, maybe it'll get there. I think like the tanks, the cargo freights sliding back and forth on the ship is kind of cool. I know that technically to be able to get that to happen with like a real water physics in a game is really, really impressive. But I think gameplay wise, I don't know if the payoff is there or if it maybe just doesn't show so much, in a trailer like that. So yeah, let's just kind of go through these games. I got a lot of notes here about what we saw. So the first thing we got was that Guile reveal. And then we saw Aliens Dark Descent, which looks like a co-op game. It was just a cinematic trailer, so there's not a ton of details about the gameplay yet. It could be like a twin stick shooter, I think. Then we got Callisto Protocol, which again is like a really cool and big title. I think gameplay wise, I think this game probably stole the show. It looks like Dead Space, a whole lot like Dead Space. It looks very good, pretty scary. The visuals are really interesting, horrifying, everything you would want out of the team that came from Visceral, who came from making those original Dead Space games to making this new thing. It's a little on the nose, I think, but I think it's really, really on the nose in a good way, I guess. So it's interesting, the concept of kind of trying to escape this prison as necromorph-like monsters are kind of running around and are super gross and scary. Really, really good stuff. I think that was pretty interesting. We already talked about Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. Flashback 2, I was surprised by that. I was super excited by that. I remember Flashback from way back in the day, so that's exciting. It'll be cool to see how that game is. After that, they showed Witchfire. Witchfire looks awesome. I think this game looks really, really cool. I don't know if it's for me, but I think it's a really cool concept. Kind of neat. And then we got Fort Solis, which was the second like sci-fi space horror game. That one seems like it's going to be more narrative based. They had Troy Baker and Roger Clark on stage who said there's a lot of action in it, but they did also say that it's going to lean more into the narrative aspect. So hard to say there. And then Routine, of course, that's the third kind of sci-fi space monstery horror game we got. And showing those games so close in proximity, I think is kind of what burned people out. The criticism is that like these games all look kind of rad, but seeing them back to back like that kind of makes them blend together, and you kind of want more variety in a show like this. I mean, Routine is a little different from the other ones. It looks like you're going to be fighting like really scary robots with teeth, which why would anybody build robots with teeth? But I think the criticisms are kind of fair there. Then of course, what would a good showcase be without some memeable aspects? We got The Rock on his phone, just plugging everything he's associated with, his Iron Paradise, an energy drink, and then it turned out that video was actually for a Black Adam trailer, which is, fine, sure, okay. Then we got kind of ad trailers for Outriders, new content coming in June 10th, and then Fall Guys free-for-all commercial, that's going to drop June 21st. And then that's when we got that Frost Giant reveal for their game Stormgate. Again, that's ex-StarCraft developers, ex-Blizzard guys coming together to make the definitive RTS. At least that's kind of what they're hoping to do. There are not a lot of RTS games out there. I think a lot of people believe the genre is dead, since MOBAs kind of came out of the woodwork. I'm excited about it, but I think it's going to be a long wait, because all we got, yesterday were, a cinematic trailer and some kind of screen grabs of assets they said that they are working with in Unreal 5. Then we got like a decent run of indie games. I won't bore you guys too much with this. I love indie games. I know it's not exactly the best fit for the audience we have here at Inside Gaming all the time, but I think the good ones really shine through. High Water is this kind of Waterworld-esque, like a cutesy Waterworld-esque post-apocalyptic world where it looks like you're adventuring with friends, kind of exploring around. Supposedly this is going to be an adventure strategy game. Then we got a trailer for American Arcadian. The vibe I got from it is it's kind of like Truman Show, where everybody who lives in the city is actually being broadcast and they kind of live this life of luxury, but there's this guy who's trying to escape, and I think that's who you're going to play as. So his name is Trevor Hills. That's a pretty good name for a protagonist. After that, we got a Goat Simulator 3 trailer, and it looks like all the Goat Simulator chaos you'd probably want. Then a game I'm really excited about, but again, I don't think showed too well, Midnight Suns. I think this trailer, the cinematic trailer, was awesome, but it doesn't really tell you anything about the game. Right now, I think the kind of Summer Game Fest, the hands-on event is happening, so I know a lot of people are out there previewing a lot of these games, and I think the feedback that's come back about Midnight Suns is pretty good, and people are pretty psyched on it. But, for people sitting at home and watching Summer Game Fest, sitting in the IMAX theater watching Summer Game Fest, I think you see Midnight Suns and you probably don't know what to think about it. You might even be misled thinking this is going to be a cool like Marvel action game with a twist, when actually in reality it's like an XCOM style card game or a strategy game or XCOM style game mixed with a card game, made by the developers behind XCOM. So I think it has real potential, and I'm really excited about this game, but I wish they would have showed gameplay during the showcase itself. After that, there was another trailer for Cuphead, The Delicious Last Course, which is the DLC for that. We've seen this a bunch. We know it's coming, nothing new. After that Cuphead trailer, we got an extended gameplay trailer for Neon White, which is super exciting. These are the developers who made Donut County, so kind of a switch, in tone and genre. It's kind of a first-person action game where you're kind of using cards to execute moves and abilities, it looks like. Really excited to see more of this game. Kind of wish I was at that hands-on event so I can actually play this game, because I think it looks pretty sick. Midnight Fight Express is another game that they showed, and that to me looks like kind of a fully 3D realized Hotline Miami, sort of. That's just kind of the vibe I got from it. They said that it's being made by a single father in Poland, which is kind of interesting. These next 2 games now, I think, are kind of a bigger deal than anybody kind of let on in any kind of reaction videos or anything that I saw. Honkai Star Rail, I think, if you know the MiHoYo-verse well, Honkai Impact and Genshin Impact, obviously. And then also Zenless Zone Zero. And I think these are fun trailers to watch if you kind of know what they are. And I think a lot of people did know that these were coming. I don't think we would have expected to see them at Summer Game Fest, but I think they're kind of a bigger deal. But they are in a way known quantities, right? This isn't like a huge world premiere in the sense that like no one ever heard of this game before, or that like we didn't know that MiHoYo was working on these new games. Next up is what seemed to be a lot of people's highlight of the show, which was a trailer for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. There was a Casey Jones reveal, which is cool if you're a Turtles fan, and then June 16th release date, which is really, really soon. That game comes out in a week, less than a week. After Shredder's Revenge, things really seemed to slow down, which what seemed to be kind of the main ad block of the show. There was a trailer for Super People Battle, which I'm not sure if that was a reveal or, maybe just like a trailer ad. There's Humankind, which is a game that we've known about for a long time. It's getting an update. There was that One Piece game, One Piece Odyssey, I think, Soul Hackers 2, Capcom Arcade Stadium 2, and then a big kind of Switch montage with all of the kind of relevant Switch games right now from Nintendo. And yeah, after that, we got a trailer for The Quarry, which is awesome. I think people are excited for The Quarry, but it's just kind of a long stretch there of not a lot of huge announcements, I think. After that though, we got a longer trailer for Nightingale, which seems to be really interesting. It's kind of like the steampunkish world where you're kind of crafting these cards which create realms for you to explore. There's base building, and it's kind of like a survival game mixed up with like kind of these mini raids of these areas. And there seems to be kind of some procedural stuff going on too. Interesting looking game. I think there's a lot of people excited for that. Next up was the thing that turned out to be, I think, a little bit cooler than people expected. There was a Saints Row reveal in which they came out and said that they are releasing the kind of character creator as a demo, so you can kind of build out your like Saints Row boss before the game comes out. And I've seen a lot of people online kind of having fun with that. Looks like the tools for that are really, really cool. And yeah, if you've been on Twitter or online anywhere, you've probably seen people using this to create their own likenesses in that Saints Row universe. People seem to be enjoying it, which is always nice. Another game I was excited about was Warhammer 40k Darktide, which is a follow-up to the Vermintide games, and that's coming out September 13th to PC and Xbox consoles exclusively. It's got a real Warhammer vibes, obviously, that kind of medieval cyberpunk mashup. There's lots of enemies on screen at one time, a lot of physics, and then you basically are going into these different areas to perform these tasks and then trying to escape, all while fighting off swarms of enemies. Looks really cool. That's coming out September 13th. That's kind of, again, a known quantity. Cool to see, but not like wow, not super wow factor, right? The next game we saw after that was Layers of Fear, which is being made by Bloober Team. I think a lot of people thought that this was a Silent Hill game. It's not, according to this trailer. It's just called Layers of Fear, and I think there's definitely fans of Bloober Team, and those are actually people who really don't like Bloober Team. I don't know which side of the fence you're on. Let me know in the comments, I guess. But yeah, that Bloober Team game turned out to be not a Silent Hill game so far. Next up was a new trailer for Gotham Knights, which, we've seen a lot already, and I think there's been some criticisms of the way that game is looking in terms of gameplay, in terms of movement. It's always cool to see more gameplay, but, for this game particularly, I think they're not doing themselves any favors by showing it more before launch at this point. I think people are either going to get sick of it or they're going to start picking it apart even more from here on out. Last up was supposed to be the big reveal of the Last of Us Remake. Obviously, that leaked about 2 hours before the show started. Jeff and Neil Druckmann were joking about it on the stage, but there was some other kind of news that came out of that. Of course, that we're going to get more news, obviously, about the Last of Us Factions project, as well as the HBO series. I guess that's kind of exciting. And then also just the confirmation that Neil Druckmann is directing a new unannounced title. They didn't specify if that's going to be like an a new IP, which has kind of been the rumors. I know there was rumors about Naughty Dog working on a fantasy game. Those kind of got debunked. The artist who kind of posted some fantasy concept art and said, like, kind of hinted like, hey, you know what this is for, who was a Naughty Dog concept artist, who came out and said like, hey, I wasn't announcing or like teasing our next game at all. This actually is inspired by Assassin's Creed or something like that. Whether or not that's true and that's just damage control, we'll kind of see from here, but who knows right now at this point. I'm not sure. I mean, that's probably true for someone to come out and clarify like that. They don't want to be, proven a liar later on down the road. So, I think other people are speculating that we're just going to get Last of Us 3, which I kind of hope not. I mean, Last of Us 2 was pretty heavy. I think I'm going to need another year or two to process my time, having spent playing that game a bunch. But yeah, I was kind of hoping that Naughty Dog was working on a brand new IP, a fantasy game, to see them use all of their tools and techniques and a completely new world and a new environment that isn't kind of modern or real day. Like, imagine them doing like a science fiction game or a space game, a fantasy game, kind of anything other than the real world setting, which is like what they're good at, sure. But, it would be cool to see them apply their talents to other settings, I think. And that was the show. I mean, that was literally the whole show. I think I pretty much talked about every single game they showed. Sorry if that was a little bit boring for you. I tend to be really thorough when I do this stuff and really have to edit myself down when I talk about video games, because I just like to talk probably too much about them. Anyways, yeah, I think Summer Game Fest, a little underwhelming this year. Probably not entirely Jeff's fault or the producer's fault who put the show together. I can imagine they're going to get more requests to be a part of the show in terms of advertisements and things like that than they're actually going to get really cool gameplays and trailers that they can show off. It's about timing and it's about what people are willing to show. Jeff also said a bunch of times that there were some games that had to pull out of the show, as well as, or things that got delayed last minute that they couldn't include. I think a lot of people expected to see a Hideo Kojima game at Summer Game Fest. We know that Jeff Keighley and Hideo Kojima are pretty buddy, and that relationship is strong. So I think a lot of people kind of expected to see that, and with it not being there, we have to assume that that Hideo Kojima might show up at the Xbox showcase to show off whatever that new project they're supposedly working on together. And then, of course, Silksong, right? A lot of people still waiting for Silksong. There was kind of a tweet exchange with somebody from the dev team on Silksong and Jeff Keighley, which kind of, I think, got out of hand, because I think people would just automatically assume like, oh, it's going to be there. It's going to be at Summer Game Fest. And it wasn't. I think a lot of people just setting themselves up for disappointment. Keighley, even before Summer Game Fest, kind of trying to set expectations, impossibly so, though, I think, just because on one end, you don't want to downplay it so much that people don't want to watch your show. But at the same time, I think he kind of knew what he was getting into. So yeah, Summer Game Fest, a little underwhelming. We ran a poll on the community tab and on our Inside Gaming Twitter, and 42% of people said that the show was a C grade for them, 30% B, only 6% saying it was an A, and 22% of people saying it was a D or lower. I think for me, this is probably B- or C territory, but that's with me kind of considering the kind of logistical implications here that, Jeff got what he could. That team of producers and stuff, they got what they could, and then kind of put on the show that they did with the best of what they had. And, that's what they get. Hopefully next year it'll be better, right? They had a real good opportunity to kind of swing for the fences this year with E3 being out of the picture. But now next year we're going to have Summer Game Fest and E3 basically going toe to toe. And I think we might see a lot of overlap between the kind of game announcements, the developers and publishers that show up to both shows. I'm not sure like how much exclusive one of those shows is going to get over the other. I mean, I would bet on Keighley to get some big reveals next year, but who knows, like he probably can't afford to have another dud like this one. But I think their terms of success are just measured by if they did a lot better than last year. When I looked at the numbers on YouTube, I think it was like 230,000 concurrents, and I think there was like at least 150 on Twitch. So, it's not a bad show in terms of views, but in terms of people wanting to be excited and kind of like get their socks blown off, that wasn't it. This wasn't it this year. Better luck next year. I like these kinds of shows. I know people are kind of hard on them, but it's always exciting when you can get some, game announcements and some big game reveals all together in one place. And, you know, somebody has to be that kind of like traffic cop person saying like, okay, now you go, now you go, now you go. Because right now it's kind of pandemonium with everybody kind of doing their own shows all spread out throughout the summer. It would be cool if we can get that all condensed back down into like a week or two. But overall, maybe it's better for the developers. Maybe it's better for the publishers, especially since they have their own kind of each individual development schedules for, you know, preparing vertical slices and demos for people to kind of try out and give them feedback on, preparing enough, you know, game assets so they have a compelling gameplay trailer. So, you know, it all comes with balance. However, if you like indie games, the Devolver Digital Showcase really has you covered. I don't think they showed a bad game. I think there's some games that are way more interesting to me than others, but they all kind of had a unique flair and a style. They're all games that I think I would like to try and play and check out. Let me run them down for you. So you got Cult of the Lamb, which it's got this cutesy art style, but it seems to be kind of a dungeon crawler with dark themes, where your hero seems to be like this kind of cute lamb with a sword. And then it kind of looks like they're recruiting villagers. And the gameplay kind of reminds me of something more like Binding of Isaac. Definitely got the roguelike flavor going on, if that's something you're into. It looks like there might be some kind of village building or persistence with kind of like base building in that respect. That's coming out August 11th. Then there's Angerfoot, which is a wild looking first person game where you just kick a whole bunch of stuff with this wild foot. And it definitely has maybe, again, some Hotline Miami vibes going on in here, but it's a first person shooter, you know, looks great. That doesn't have a date, but you can wishlist it on Steam if you're interested. Just kind of a wild looking game. Then there's Skate Story, which is completely wild looking. You play as kind of like this mirror glass skater looking person going through a kind of surrealistic world, but executing these awesome skate tricks. I mean, if the gameplay is as good as something like Skate, or, you know, it looks more like Skate than Tony Hawk, but if it's that good, that quality, this could be a really, really cool game. The vibe here is really awesome. So looks pretty cool. Looks definitely worth checking out. Then of course there's Card Shark, which if you haven't heard of, it's kind of a game that's about cheating at cards. It's a really, really cool concept. You essentially like team up with this NPC, and kind of the goal of the game is kind of to like cheat your way through these different card games while you're kind of trying to unravel this greater mystery about like this big event that happened. You're basically learning different card tricks, and then the way that you input those card tricks on the controller actually kind of mimics the motions that the character in the game would be doing to kind of perform the tricks. So it definitely has a lot of unique ideas in here. It looks kind of fun. And then there's Point B. I think that's how you say it, Point B, which artistically, I don't know if it's exactly something that I'm into, but it is made by the same person who made Downwell. Downwell is really, really good. A really, really cool game. If you haven't played it, you should check it out. It's kind of a simplistic arcadey action game with maybe like one or two inputs. In Downwell, you kind of just go down and you use like different weapons and jumps and things to kind of like just massacre all these different enemies when you go down. This Point B game looks like it's got kind of the same idea. But last, and definitely not least, I saved this one for last because it is certainly the most exciting. The game that you're gonna see a lot of people talking about for a while is a game called The Plucky Squire. And it kind of starts out when you see it as a traditional kind of top-down adventure RPG, where you've got a player character with a sword and kind of doing traditional, you know, action RPG stuff. But then it kind of switches perspective to 2D at times. And then the big reveal at the end of the trailer is that you can actually, you know, jump out of the storybook where you're kind of playing and then explore the world as like a full, you know, 3D game, right? And then it's got like this link between worlds kind of feel, where there's like different mugs or lunch boxes or different things that also have kind of art on the side, where you kind of, it seems like you can kind of like jump into those worlds, and then you either maybe solve puzzles in there or you fight enemies in there. It's very, very fascinating looking. It has a real cool style. It looks really neat. So I think of all the games in the last 2 days that I've seen, that's probably the one that I'm most excited to play. Callisto Protocol is awesome too. I think that game actually stole the show for Summer Game Fest. But in terms of like a type of game that I hadn't really seen before, haven't seen a lot of, I think the Plucky Squire kind of takes it there, right? As a kind of unique and interesting ideas. coming to the forefront. So, you know, good on you, Devolver Digital. They don't miss too often, and they do. Usually it's, for me at least, it's because of my personal preferences and not because like the game itself isn't very good. So yeah, pretty fun stuff overall. We have a lot more showcases to go. I believe that we're gonna see Xbox on Sunday, the PC Gaming Show also on Sunday. There's a Capcom showcase on Monday, and a Final Fantasy VII anniversary next week. And then, you know, between now and then, there's a bunch of smaller showcases kind of stuck in between. I think like the Wholesome game showcase, and there's a future game showcase as well. So just a lot more game announcements coming. It's almost going to be exhausting, I think, at this point. We'll try to keep you guys up to date with the relevant stuff. Let me know what you thought about this video. If I spent too much time talking about games that you don't care about, you know, we can certainly trim this down later. If you like this more kind of off the cuff style, definitely let me know that too. Anyways, thank you all for continuing to support the channel. It means a lot. We really appreciate it. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video right here on Inside Gaming.